Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new The Hacker Factory podcast with hacker maker Phillip Wylie. You're about to discover what the role of a professional hacker entails, the different specializations it holds, and what it takes to learn and become one. Enjoy the conversation as Phillip and guests unveil the secrets of professional hacking, a mysterious, intriguing, and often misunderstood occupation. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Hacker Factory podcast. Today I'm happy to have Joe Vest on. Joe Vest has a really cool background, and I got to meet him last year during SpectropS Red Team training in Virginia, so I was really excited that he offered to be on the show. So thanks for joining us, Joe. Would you tell the listeners about yourself?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Phillip, for having me. Again, my name is Joe Vest. The quick background is I've been doing IT and security for about 20 years now, and done all sorts of jobs in that time. Currently, I am the technical director at Help Systems for the Cobalt Strike project. And a few things I've done over my career that I was excited about was I was an author for the first SANS Red Teaming course. Ultimately left that, turned that into a book, Red Team Development Operations. So I guess technically I'm an author now. And enjoyed a lot of my career with teaching and helping mentor students throughout a lot of this as I'm doing the hands-on technical side. So that's the quick background I have.
Yeah, so you've got to work some really cool places too, because you'd worked at SpectropS. So how was that? What was that like?
Oh, that was a lot of fun. SpectropS is, there's a lot of these, I'll call them the boutique companies, that a lot of the really good, prominent people in the security industry have come together to do some really, really great work. So working out there was really, really amazing. While I was there, I was acting as the training director. So really overseeing a lot of their training courses. You mentioned the training course that you took for the Red Team. Well, they have a few of those. So I was running a lot of their training side to actually help deliver a lot of that pieces. But that was definitely a much further along in my career where I could jump in and help with a fledgling company try to grow and become what they are doing now today. So that was a fun time.
I bet so. It was cool to get to meet you last year, because you're like one of the few people that I got to meet last year due to the pandemic, because I was able to get to a couple events before things started shutting down.
Oh yeah. That was it's been strange with it still, but we've been trying the virtual conference piece, and it's been working well. I mean, I spoke at Wild West Hacking Fest recently, and I would have to say that was one of the most enjoyable remote conferences I've been to. They did an amazing job. So actually, I got to feel like it was almost a real engaging conversation virtually. So that was actually really, really interesting to see. Or we've just been away from people so long that just that little bit of engagement feels okay. So I don't know.
Yeah, thanks to Black Hills for really laying the framework for virtual conferences, because they were one of the first ones to really set that up using Discord. So there was some sort of community to go along with streaming talks and stuff.
It was really interesting to see how we could actually engage, even though I could not physically see an audience. But that was really, really a lot of fun. So with that, I do really enjoy getting out speaking and teaching, and it's helped me push myself to understanding, to different levels of understanding, so that I can know what I'm talking about, or challenge myself in the sense that if I can help someone else move forward on this, that means I've at least established some sort of background and knowledge, information of some opinion about something. So teaching has been a really, really good outlet for me to learn. Sometimes I feel like I learn more than the students, and that may sound cliche, but it is really, really true, because it's challenging to stand up in front of someone with confidence and to deliver quality information. That's really, really tough.
Very cool. This is a good audience for that too, because a lot of the people that listen are people just getting started out. So you have this really cool career, and why don't you share with the listeners how you got started?
So early days, I was at a community college, kind of started at that time frame. Did not really know what I was doing. I bounced around several careers. In total, I think I went to 5 different colleges that I would drop out of most of them because I was trying to, early days, find myself, figure out what's going on, whether I was playing, bass in like jazz band, or I was trying to go to school to be a meteorologist. I looked at that. I was going to be a forest ranger, had a full ride scholarship to be a forest ranger. And then the day of like getting books, I said, yeah, this is not really what I want to do. And I dropped out. So this is the kind of things you think of when you're in your young 20s trying to figure out what you're doing. You just do weird things. But I was going to become an herbalist, a natural medicine person. All of these things were going along. Ultimately, through life and things, I was living in Florida at the time. I wound up moving up to Alabama where some family were, and living and working. And I was working at a distribution center for Walmart, driving a forklift. And that's what I was doing. I eventually found, while going through various colleges, I found a technical school. And this was in the 95, 96 time frame or so. And I went and they had a 2-year program, and I did this and actually found I loved it. I was like, oh, technology is really, really interesting. I really didn't ever explore this before. And it drove me into finishing this technical school, not like a regular normal 4-year school. But at the time, you're talking pre-Y2K, the .com boom was really starting to get ramped up. So you're looking at a good time to get into technology, not unlike what we're seeing today. So you saw this. So there's opportunity, and it just fit. And I just had a knack for this. This was really, really, and I'm not, tooting my own horn, but I see a lot of people go to technical schools, and I only see a small percentage who actually apply themselves to make something valuable. And this hit me perfectly. And I just excelled at that. Went down to school, started to do my whole MCSE Microsoft certification route. And after that was done, I quit school and I got a job, and I went down the sysadmin route. And I thought I really knew what I was doing. And I was like, I kicked butt in school, but then reality hits me, and you start to see how this works. And I start to work in the real world and solving, problems. That's what you do in IT. You're not really technical per se. And you're actually solving problems. And that was something I had to learn early on, was like, okay, I might be fixing these printers. I might be writing code to make the network more efficient, but none of that mattered. And this was all about, solving people's problems. So I was working on that for a while. And during this time, I was working in an accounting firm. I was there for about 7 years. The CFO took me aside because I thought I was doing all these great things from a technical perspective. And I got slapped with reality on what the business world thought about IT. And again, this is not much different today, but he said, when I look at this, I look at you as a water company or the power company. It's either on or off. If it's all working, I don't notice you. And that's fine. But you can't have better water or better power that you're delivering. And that was the opinion that the CFO took of what we did. And at that point, I changed everything I was working on, and I tried to apply technical pieces to some business case. And we always talk about that. But when you actually see that and it comes into reality, that you can internalize that, it makes a huge difference. Because now at this time, I took ownership of the paperless project. So during these times, there was a huge transition from paper-driven workflows to digital workflows. And it seems strange to think that happened. But yeah, there was a time when the whole concept of paperless was a fad, and we were trying to figure out how to do this. And I took that as ownership. So as to solve a business problem versus a technical problem. And although I disagree today for that CFO that you can have higher quality delivery of technical things, the opinion of the one that mattered, in this case, he mattered on this, counts. So although whether they're right or wrong, those opinions really, really do influence how you're viewed and how your career might be driven around you. So you really have to understand that business case. So that changed things completely, which actually made me want to leave that company. Not that I really love the organization, but I hit a plateau. And what I also learned, unfortunately, in the world is it's hard to grow within your own companies, and sometimes you have to leave. For some reason, we as humans value bringing a new person in at a different level versus promoting internally. Promotions and moving internally is really slow, and it's just something you learn. And I wish it wasn't the case, but more people gain better jobs and careers by moving and leaving an organization and staying internally. It's just something that I have seen. So I didn't learn that till later, but so I did this. And during this time, while I was out there, going through this, changing into this project management technical role, I also went to various conferences, and I learned about this thing called the CISSP, which sounds strange because I did not separate security from IT. My job was all things technical, whether it's the firewall configuration, server configuration, user administration, printers, all of the things. So from this IT hat, I did everything. Now, I did poorly, to be honest, like to do all of them. So the whole jack of all trades and master of none was really defined my early career. But I was really, really good, had a really good knack at solving those problems. It doesn't mean I did it securely by any means. Anyways, I saw this person with the CISSP, and I really thought it was amazing. I was like, this is really interesting. Like, this is a security thing. And I started learning about security testing, pen testing. That's a job. So I actually took 9 months to learn the CISSP material. I didn't do any boot camps or anything. I really wanted to learn and dig this. And I went and eventually took the test. And to be honest, I was very disappointed. I was like, oh, I really made this out to be a big deal. And it was not really as big of a deal as I thought. But I really, really dug into this, and I did it what I call the right way. So I don't think it was a waste of time, because that shifted my mindset over to security by utilizing that certification as a jumping point. And then I could retroactively look and say, well, let me really put it in its place. It wasn't a maximum. It was a good one little bar to jump over. But what it let me do was sort of get my thought process down on how I want to move forward, because I was doing all this IT. And I actually looked at other career paths. Like, how do I do this? Like, how do I change? Because I had no experience. A lot of people have this today. I'm young. I had no experience. Even though I had 7 years of doing sysadmin work, no security experience. So I couldn't really jump into that. I saw advertisements for jobs with the Secret Service. I started looking at that, but I was like, well, this is really not a special agent, but more the standard law enforcement. So, oh, that's not what I want. FBI was looking for IT people. I applied and went through an entire crazy process and was accepted as a candidate for a special agent. And this went really quick, because it only took 9 months from zero to going through all of their steps. And if you're familiar with that, there's a tremendous amount of processes that you have to go through, and tests and exams and interviews. But I made it through all that, and I'm sitting at the academy, and I'm there for about 2 weeks, and I get hurt. So an old injury that came back up happened during PT. And at the time I had a young son, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. The injury, the healing would have taken longer. It wasn't like a quick heal. So it was more like a 6-month process. So I was like, well, I can't really do this to my family. So I dropped out, and I was bummed, defeated, all of those things. You feel like a failure. Everything is going through your head on this. Although I've been doing well in other areas, this really hit me hard. And I started to, I still want to do something. So I actually volunteered at through Infogard, through my contacts at Infogard. I volunteered at the local FBI field office, and they were standing up a malware range. I had no idea about this, but I could jam out some technical things. Like if you say, I need to build up a server, this was pre-cloud stuff. So you're doing it all physical, bare bone hardware, spinning up images, tearing them down. So I made an entire range to do malware analysis. And this was for like a static and dynamic analysis. So we could launch malware in a safe environment, capture all the data, do some analysis. It was really, really interesting to see. So I volunteered on my own time, did this once a week for probably a year, going up there, and had met a lot of people, and it really helped push me into the security field indirectly. But it just took my effort to actually go and push forward on that. And during this time, I took a couple of SANS classes and everything. And I finally was able to break out of the technical IT world, and I got a job in GRC. I'm not sure if people still call this, but governance, risk, and compliance. So at a bank, suit and tie, I broke into security, and I'm doing compliance, and it wasn't bad. I got to see now, what does corporate life think of security? And it was all textbook security is what I worked on. So I'm helping projects, helping teams, interpret policy and rules into their implementation of whatever they're doing. So, take it what it is. There's definitely a role for compliance for sure. I'm not going to say it's not important, but it's not for everyone, and especially if you really are wanting to get your hands dirty, and that's the area you want to focus on. So I did that for a while, and that was my break. But my real break was I found a niche that needed people. So again, like if you take this for today, this is something that really helps. The team needed some web app testing support. I had very little web app testing support, but I could do some cross-site scripting. I could do some rudimentary SQL injection. I could do the basic things that you might learn like from a SANS class. And that was enough. And I was like, wow, I'm really terrible at this, but I shined because the bar was so low. And that sounds terrible to say, but it got me in the door. And now I am hands-on. I'm not doing compliance anymore. I'm hands-on. I'm actually doing application security testing. So I'm building up security tests. So I don't just want to do the test. I build up whole processes. It's just something I did from my IT days. So I build out like a range, a tool set, and I wanted to have consistent processes to go through this to be efficient. And that was when I really started to excel. And I said, okay, now I can start to do this. So I worked through this, but that whole FBI failure left a void, which I don't know if this was good or bad, but it left one thinking, oh, I failed, so I need to figure how to succeed. And that drove me down this government route. And a information assurance job opened up with the government. So the government was actually in the DoD. I argued they lowered the bar because getting into the DoD was hard as a civilian employee, not as a contractor, but actually a government employee. But they were really desperate to bring in IT people from the outside. Things were struggling. So they brought me in. This was maybe 2008, 9, somewhere around that time, I guess. I have to see the exact time, but somewhere in that 2000, mid 2000s. I got in and I'm back to the compliance side. And oh my gosh, the government, the DoD I felt like I went back in time. I was like, what the heck is going on? This is things have changed now, but at that time it was just a self-licking ice cream cone of where everyone stayed in its own piece. There was no looking outside in the world to understand what's going on. The problems they had were self-imposed, and the solutions at the time were compliance. Compliance equaled security at the time. And it wasn't even great compliance. Everything was bad. And I was like, it was miserable because I tried to move forward and I realized you cannot turn the ship very fast. And I learned like, wow, this is a crazy thing. So it was defeating, to be honest. And that's terrible to say, but I had a lot of passion, drive, want to do great things. And I realized that is a tough world to have that in. And I was about to leave that, and a buddy of mine said, hey, there's this local group, they do red teaming. And I was fortunate enough to be where I was working that there's only a handful of DoD red teams, and I was in a location that needed help. And I found my home. They brought me in, I could do some things. It was one of the most amazing times I could have to grow as someone, because it was a lot of people call it the golden age of red teaming, because the time was so desperate and needed. The processes, what was going on, the vulnerabilities, the flaws, it was just ripe for everything. So luck and timing had a lot to do with my career pieces. But if I look back, I see all the things I've done up to this point, so that when opportunity knocked, I was able to jump on that. And as soon as I did this, it just flourished. And I was lucky enough to not just talk about security, such as when you look in the compliance side, and this is not an insult to anyone who does this, but a lot of the people who are doing this did not have hands-on outside of a classroom. So they have a lot of theoretical knowledge. I got to be the person that says, okay, Joe, just get on the keyboard and do all the things. And the first time you sit down and your job is to break into the network, but not just break in and break in, but you're breaking in, you're going to establish long-term persistence. You're going to live on this network for, a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, whatever it is. Everything changes about what you think about how a threat operates. And I really started to begin and understand threat operations. And I was lucky enough to actually be able to do these tests on live real world production networks. So it wasn't just pretend range stuff or classroom. This was real. And I was very fortunate that this happened to me. So I got to do this, got to do all kinds of crazy things. Yes, I was still in the government, and you still had all that overhead of silly government stuff, which can be draining. But I did this for several years. And I'm actually, you do get, it's kind of strange how no matter what you're doing, especially if you're hungry, you get burned out. And even though you're doing amazing, crazy stuff, I'm actually sitting in Hawaii on a 3-week long second part of a red team engagement. So I've already been grinding away at something for multiple weeks, crazy hours, just long days, just grind, hack. And it sounds fun, but that can get grueling and grinding. And I'm in Hawaii, and this the lead out there actually says this. He says, how did he put it? He says, hey, I know we're here. We're doing some testing. There's a light at the end of this tunnel, but there's no beach on it. And the person was basically saying, yeah, you're in Hawaii, but I think you're not going to get any time off to do anything enjoyable. And it just cuts you at your knees. Not that we had time. We were still working, but there was, a day of a break and like relax could have been nice. Anyways, all of this was just very defeating as we're doing stuff. Really cool work. I mean, this particular one was really, really, really good. That had some really, really good impacts that something I can personally be really, really proud about. But me and my buddy were talking like, hey, you want to start a company? Kind of joking. And over the next 3 weeks, we sat in the hotel, like a little conference room, and built out our business plan. And our company, Menace, which you can't see that there, but that little poster you can see, Phillip, behind me, that was my first company that I did.
Oh, cool.
And myself and my partner, James, said, hey, we're going to start a company. And we just built the entire plan in those 3 weeks after working all day. And just when we got back, we came up with the time to unplug. And within the next 2 or 3 months, we were both out the door from our government jobs and running our company for full time. And just did this. And this was a red team consulting company. So similar to a lot of the other companies you see. So we did this, and we ran that for 4 years. And that was amazing to do. During that time frame, while we were running this, it gave us a lot of different freedoms to do stuff. That's when I was able to make a request reach out to Ed Scotus to say, hey, I got this proposal to do a red teaming course. What do you think about that? And they said, oh, that's a good idea. Gave him the proposal. He gave me the thumbs up. And I was like, whoa, you're really going to say, let's move forward on this? And so we were starting with a 2-day course. So myself and James created a red teaming course for SANS, which was really cool to do at the time. And while I was running my company, I taught that course for about 2 years. So if you kind of think of what I just said, I said, I'm starting my own company. I'm running this SANS course and building it from scratch, from all components. I did nothing but work for 4 years, and it was just tough. It was mentally tough. Family, it was really, really tough on the family. So all the freedoms and great things were really being pushed back on from the other side. So I actually, during this time, after 4 years, we were looking at how do we change? What do we do? Do we change our business model or whatever? We wound up reaching out to the team over Spectre Ops, because I knew some of them. I knew Raphael Mudge, who was working through this, and he introduced me to the rest of the team. And we wound up, after about 7 or 8 months after they started, we merged our company with them. So we were part of their second round after they brought their initial group in. We came in with Spectre Ops and brought my team in there. So we brought 4 people over and joined the Spectre Ops group to help mitigate some of those challenges we had as a small company. And that's what we did there. And then at the same time, as that was going on, I get to Spectre Ops. I take a step back from SANS and I say, thank you, but no thank you. This is just not worth the time and effort that I'm working on. I was impatient and I wanted to be, certified SANS instructor. I never was certified, but I was teaching and doing all these things. And that's a whole different conversation. So I had to just say, hey, thanks, no thanks, and pass that course along. And instead, we just took all that material, because our intellectual property, and we wrote a book. As you can see, I got a stack here. That was my remaining stack that I have not been able to give away because we don't get to go in conferences in person. But so we did that, and so I've got to have this nice own my own company. I'm working with Spectre Ops now. I kind of try to take some of the stress off by not doing the SANS training as well. But one thing I never accounted for is having and joining with another company that was still fledgling. I basically was in startup mode for about 7 years because I ran my company for 4, and then I stayed with Spectre Ops for about almost 3. And that was just really, really tough. So the consulting life was grinding me down. Nothing against what we were doing at Spectre Ops, nothing against the team out there, but I was traveling. And if you work consulting, you know you're going to travel. And I was working 50 to 70% on the road. And I just said, I want to take a break. And I left Spectre Ops and I went to AWS as their red team lead. And not this isn't a hey, AWS is easier, but I went back to an internal team where the pressures and day-to-day life was reasonable and kind of boring. I hate to say it, but it's way different from consulting because you're constantly moving from one thing to the next and to the next. And I really wanted to escape and do that. And that was one of the best moves I ever did later in my career. So what I learned throughout this whole time was you don't have to be happy with where you are. You need to be content with where you are, but you've got to look at, what kind of things from physical and mental health are these career changes doing to you? And you don't always have to be out there pushing everything. And that break to AWS, again, it sounds like I just went and did an easy job because it was not. It was a really, really good job. And I really enjoyed being out there, still keep in touch with everyone out there. But it was the needed time I needed for a break. And that helped me tremendously. And I only left because I saw something shiny, and it's my habit, is with Raphael Mudge, when he sold Cobalt Strike over to Help Systems, he kind of went through a transition over a year, and then they were looking for someone to help backfill part of his roles. And that role gave me the opportunity to re-engage with the community and do a lot of work that I kind of missed that I wasn't doing at AWS. So I said, sure, I'll come over there, and I kind of joined Help Systems as the tech director so I can help work with a really, really good team to work on a product. So now instead of just working internally on red team testing, now I get to shift over and focus on the product space, which I never really done as much in the past. So that was really, really good. And that's been up to the last 6 months or so. And that's been a really, really good challenge.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah, I've been kind of following your career because I was kind of surprised to see when you were at AWS because I'd noticed that on LinkedIn that you were working at AWS, and I actually messaged you around that time. So that's pretty cool. So I'm really imagine that your experience as a red teamer has really helped with the Cobalt Strike product since you've probably had a lot of hands-on experience with it.
Yeah, I still consider myself as an operator. So looking at this, I would say starting when I worked with the DoD on the DoD red team, that's when things shifted to what I now don't call red teaming and what I now call threat-based testing. But that's really helped me understand this threat perspective of what's needed. And this is from the in-depth technical side to the operational side. And there's a balance between both because I'm a really, really solid operator. But if you said, are you the most detailed and best at building and creating all the, minute tools and stuff? I'll say no. But I'll go back to what I've really learned is, especially in the world that I've lived in, red teaming, it is very much a team sport. And learning to work and operate within a team and to be able to get great things done from groups of people it's a skill and a talent in its own. And that's something I really, really enjoyed because it allows me to explore, work with other people who can do really amazing things and help encourage and push them to build, interesting tools, products, capabilities, whatever it is that helps the entire team. And also learn how to spread that message and help give credit to that individual and to the team themselves. So that's just another thing I've gone through as I've, become more of a lead throughout my career.
So since you've had, based on your career, how you got in and got to where you're at, and you've mentored and taught people, what would you recommend for someone that wanted to become a red team operator?
So red teaming is a good long-term goal. Don't be impatient. Fundamentally, everything is about understanding a problem set. What are you trying to solve? So anytime if you work in red teaming, you have to realize a couple things that's important. One, you don't have your own playground. You are a kid with really, really cool toys, but you've got to take them to someone else's house. You got to take them to someone else's playground to play. That's what you have. You can go in your own playground, but no one's going to listen and watch you because there's no value there. The reason you exist as a red teamer is you're part of the security testing community. So you got to have some sort of value. So you really have to understand that value. And I don't care what you do from a technical side. I don't care how advanced things are. If you can't play nicely or you don't know how to translate what you're doing into some business case, you're not going to be invited back to play. And that's a really hard pill to swallow sometimes, because you just want to say, no, but listen to me. This is the technical thing. You're going to get breached. You're going to get hacked. And all of those things don't work if you cannot translate that over. So that's one of the biggest things I've seen so far. So what that really means is you've got to understand the problems that you're working on. And then you can start to say, okay, how do I bring this from a technical solution over to solve that problem? So it goes back to what I used to do in my normal IT problem solving days. Like that set up so much foundations of just troubleshooting to even troubleshooting, business cases. It's the same thing.
Oh, very cool. So as far as like any kind of courses or anything like that, you'd recommend someone to start out with as far as trying to learn red teaming?
So that's tough. So right now, there used to not be the case where there's any red teaming courses. And yes, I will say, you mentioned Spectre Ops. Spectre Ops has a great course on red team operations. The 0 Point Security has great training. 40 North with Chris Trunser has great training. So if you see any of these trainings are typically offered at like Black Hat or something, or they run them on their own, there's a lot of great red team courses. And what I would say is they're not beginning courses. And there's two pieces of information, two things that you need to learn when you're doing red teaming. One is you have to have a strong technical background of all the things. And that means you've got to understand operating systems, not just one, but multiple. You need to understand the fundamentals and principles of how protocols work, because you're going to have communications that are moving. You have to understand fundamental principles of how processes execute, because especially now today, our defensive side is really looking and shifted to the endpoint. So you're saying, okay, how do these things interact with this endpoint? So you have to have that knowledge. And then you have the other side, which is the operational side, is how do you actually run through and take all of these complex technical things and put them into a usable format. Eventually, you have to do something. You can't just talk about it and can't just do in-depth technical things. You eventually have to put your hands on the keyboard and exercise something. And that takes processes and discipline of understanding. So as far as these courses go, for red teaming specifically, most of those individuals most of the organizations who teach red teaming at at the Black Hat and such do really, really well. For more generalized security, and maybe SANS would get upset if I say that, I would say SANS is a good location for that. But I would say this is kind of the mile wide, inch deep more approach from SANS. So it's very comprehensive across the board, but you're not going to see a lot of those principles. And the other thing is hands-on. That is going to be the best. You got to work for a red team if you want to know red teaming. And that's a whole chicken before the egg thing, or catch-22. It's like, well, how do I get a job in red teaming without it? Right now, fortunately, there's a lot of opportunities. I would argue that if you have great communication skills and the right attitude, you can get a job in the space you're looking for, because the technical skills and such can be taught, but all of the other skills, the soft skills, the trying to decompose a client's needs into something that's actionable is something that can be harder to learn.
Yeah, the soft skills are often overlooked, and that's one of the things too. And I know when people want to get into pen testing, I think if you don't like writing reports, then that may not be the best area to be in.
Yeah, you may not want to do that. And also, I tell people, I said, if you can't be happy that when you do some great exploit, great hack, whatever it is, you high five the person next to you, back in the day when we sat working with each other. If that's not enough, then this may not be for you, because when you write those reports and do all this hard work, and your organization internally or a client looks at it, so, oh, thanks, and then they file it and do nothing with it, you have to be happy with that, because not everyone listens and takes your advice or does what you think they should do. Again, this is not your playground, it's other people's playground. So learning to operate within other people's playgrounds and being okay with their choices is fine. Now, as you mature, you become stronger in understanding how to influence that. And that's more of a skill. So I have tried to adapt that. And that's one of the things I really work on is, instead of someone just putting the report on the shelf, I've learned delivering this information in ways that try to influence change better. But it doesn't mean that anyone's going to listen to me. So that's important to understand. If that's important to you, then don't get into this field.
Yeah, very, very, very good advice there. It's kind of interesting too, the remediation piece too, when you're doing pen tests or red teaming, and when you find some vulnerability and it doesn't get remediated, or they want to file risk acceptance. One of my favorite all-time hacks from a web app pen test, I was able to get command line access from a SQL injection vulnerability through the internet. And since it's on a dev server, the client filed a risk exception because it was a dev box.
Yep.
So some of those
and
things.
You got to be okay with doing that. And I don't know how popular this is, but sometimes I wonder, do people really want to be secure? And maybe I should not say that, but I say that in the actions that people take. On the surface, everyone's like, security is number one. But then when you see the mitigations and the actions and what's going on, you see it's not number one. And that's okay. Again, it's their playground. It's their decision to do this. So you have to be okay when, whatever it is you've discovered is not fixed. And you just have to be at peace with that. I tell everyone, enjoy what you're doing, get what you can out of it from a technical perspective, make yourself better, provide a good service to the organization you're working for. And that's all you can ever hope for.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how that works, because like you mentioned, some companies say that security is top priority, but you can tell when you find things that they really wished you hadn't found. And sometimes it's just a checkbox. They're doing this because of PCI compliance or.
Yep. Which goes back to good planning. And that gets back into the communication skills, because if you understand it up front, I would argue that you should know all of that and what the results and why you're doing a test in the first place. One thing that I see over and over, and it's happened actually forever, is when I see communication starting with an organization and someone comes to you and says, hey, I want a red team. And the consulting team or whoever's working this immediately jumps in, okay, our red team engagements are typically 3 weeks and we have 2 people or 3 people or whatever it is. They jump into this technical solution, and all they're taking is customer says, I want a red team engagement. And those who do better are the ones who stop and say, okay, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Forget about this red teaming thing. What do you want to do with this when we're done? What is the expected output that you want? So when you can start to have those conversations, again, those soft skills, those communication skills, you can actually start to influence that organization, because I feel like the entire engagement process is an education session. So not just the testing, but actually to educate your internal or external customer on this threat-based approach. So those are things that you really can you can excel quite well if you can start to engage and build that relationship with that client.
Yeah, and definitely you're doing your customer a better service when you're helping them define their goals, because not all customers really know all the different components and what they really need to do. But if you can guide them through that, then they're going to have faith in you, and you just kind of become that trusted advisor.
Yeah, that is a huge component to this. So I know everyone wants to say, I want to get into red teaming and hacking or pen testing or whatever it is. That's only half the pieces. That is technical debt that you need to go, pay down. You need to learn those skills. And so speaking strictly technical, I would say you need to understand this stuff, and not just what you learned in a course that's a definition, but the better you understand the fundamental principles about why something is a flaw And the SQL injection thing is a big piece that I always get into. And I see people, it's like, well, it's input validation. And if you stop at input validation, then I would say you have not internalized what the real flaws are. You need to go past that and say, what does that mean? And what do these components mean? So you can actually take these flaws, these ideas, and break those down so you really, really understand what's going on. Because when you understand them, then you can actually have real advice for fixing them. You can actually test them effectively, and you can explain what's really wrong. Because you never want to be on the side where you do a test, you make advice to fix something, and what you advised was wrong or incomplete. You want that to be thorough. So when you dive into these technical areas, really, you need to have a passion to understand really what's going on, so that you can truly get to the heart of whatever that flaw is you're trying to work through.
So we're getting down towards the end of the show. Is there any advice you'd like to give on things we haven't touched on?
The biggest thing I can say is you have two ways of doing this world, of doing this job. You can do it as a job, and there's nothing wrong with that. You go to work, you do your thing, you don't really push really hard. And again, this is not bad, but if you really want to excel and you're trying to push in, you've got to have passion. And those that I see who have a passion and a love for technology are the ones who excel at this. And not just excel, they thrive at this. Because it's, even if you're new and you're super excited, I just learned about this new thing, and the whole rest of the world may know about it, but because it's exciting to you, you're going to have support by the community, and you will really work hard to push forward. Those that succeed really find this as sometimes they do it as a hobby. This is instead of like going, hey, I'm going to jump on my Xbox, I am going to go, write some code and really just dive into this and like figure out these puzzles. So that passion for technology is probably the biggest thing you can have to push yourself forward.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us, Joe. It's an honor to have you on the show.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks, Phillip.
Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hacker Factory podcast with Phillip Wylie. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.